Hanukkah, Asher, Feast of Dedications. Okay, I know some people have, kept the Feast of Feast of Dedications last month or maybe a few days ago. But regardless to when you determine the Feast of Dedications, the importance is that we keep it, especially in the land of our captivity. The scriptures let us know that for the memorials and for the feast days in Leviticus 23, which of course the Feast of Dedications is not in there, but it lets us know that when we have these feasts, we are to do them from generation to generation in all of our dwellings. Okay, so I'm going to go to 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 59 to read about the Feast of Dedications, which was implemented for our people many years after time of the wilderness with Moses. Okay, 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 59, and it reads, "Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness." So with gladness, we need to keep the Feast of Dedication for 8 days, as well as all the feasts and Sabbath of the Most High God. We'll go now to 2 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 18. 2 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 18. Second Maccabees chapter 1, verse 18. "Therefore, whereas we are now proposed to keep the purification of the temple upon the 25th day of the month Caslu, we thought it necessary to certify you thereof, that ye also keep it as the feast of the tabernacles and of the fire, which was given us when Nehemiah offered sacrifice, after that he had builded the temple and the altar." Okay, so this day ought to be kept similar to the Feast of Tabernacles. So it's an 8-day feast. Okay, now I'm going to go to John chapter 10, verse 22. John chapter 10, verse 22. Verse 22. "And it was at Jerusalem the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter." 23. "And Yahawashi walked in the temple in Solomon's porch." So for all the Christians that say we don't have to keep these feasts, you see here that Yahawashi, whom they call Jesus Christ, kept the Feast of Dedication in its proper season. He went into the temple and he fellowshiped and he observed this day. Okay, so you want to be like Jesus, but you're not doing the things that Jesus did. You're not doing the things Jesus taught and affirmed. Okay, he kept the feasts of God. And we as the children of Israel are to keep the feast of the Most High God. Okay, so I'm going to get into the topic, which is entitled, "Captivity is Turning Our People's Minds into Mush." Okay, this captivity is turning our people's mind into mush. Okay, so I'm going to start off in the book of Exodus, reading chapter 1, verses 11 through 14. We're just going to start there. Exodus chapter 1, verses 11 through 14. Okay, because the reality is, being here in Babylon, being here in America, and being indoctrinated with the customs and traditions of America, we have forgotten who we are. We have failed to realize the will of the Most High God for our lives as a people, as a nation. Okay, and when the men of the Most High try to bring out the precepts and bring out, the will of the Most High for us, we don't want to hear it, man. We don't want to hear it. But all we do is just regurgitate the same Christian rhetoric we've been hearing our entire lives. when you dissect that Christian rhetoric, when you dissect that Christian logic, you find that it does not align with the scriptures. It does not align with the Bible. But we hold on to it. For whatever reason, we hold on to Christendom. We hold on to those ideals. We hold on to that doctrine. And it's like a drug. It's turning our minds into mush. Okay? Just like any person, when they're strung out on drugs, they're not fit to do anything. Their mind is mush. Okay? They can't function properly. They can't rationalize things properly. Okay? And that's what Christianity has done to us. That's what this captivity has done to us. Okay? So Exodus chapter 1, verses 11 through 14. Therefore, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. So you see here the children of Israel, our great ancestors in the land of Egypt, had fallen into bondage by the Egyptians. There was a Pharaoh that came that knew not Joseph and saw the children of Israel growing in number, in exceeding number, and he saw it as a threat. And he said, look, we got to exterminate them. Okay, right here is the original plan of eugenics that was implemented on our great ancestors. The Egyptian Pharaoh said, look, we got to exterminate this people, because if they seek to join themselves with our enemies, they'll destroy us. There's more Israelites in Egypt than there are Egyptians. And so cunningly, they placed the children of Israel under bondage. But you're seeing here that they were afflicted greatly with rigor. Their lives were made bitter with slavery, cruelty. Okay? Just walk on through. Let's see. We're going to go to chapter 5 of Exodus, verses 14, 15, and 19. Exodus chapter 5, verses 14, 15, and 19. Okay? So, we read in the first chapter how their lives were made bitter by hard bondage and rigor. Everything they did was done with rigor. Taskmasters were set over the children of Israel. Okay? And there were, I want to say, like foremen. Is it here in the scripture? Yeah, the officers. They were placed over our people too, in order to keep us on task, to keep, whatever, what's the word I'm looking for? Obligation, and whatever task that Pharaoh wanted for us to complete. Okay? The taskmasters whipped us into shape and made our lives bitter. Okay? Exodus chapter 5, verses 14, 15, and 19. And the officers of the children of Israel, which Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and demanded, Wherefore have ye not fulfilled your task in making brick both yesterday and today and heretofore? So Pharaoh assigned Egyptian taskmasters over the children of Israel. The Egyptian taskmasters selected particular men of the children of Israel to rule over the rest of the congregation of Israel. And so the taskmasters would beat the officers and say, yo, where's the brick at? Why isn't the brick made? You ain't make enough from yesterday or today. Okay? And now when these officers are getting beat, and they're demanding the brick, now the officers are beating their own brother in order for them to produce enough brick to satisfy the orders from Pharaoh. It was just a chain of command. Pharaoh wanted this done. The taskmasters had to, get it done. And the officers of the children of Israel who were over their brethren, they had to get it done and whip their people into shape to make sure it got done. Verse 15. Then the officers of the children of Israel came and cried unto Pharaoh, saying, Wherefore dealest thou thus with thy servants? 19. The officers of the children of Israel did see that they were in evil case, after it was said, Ye shall not minish aught from your bricks of your daily task. So even though their workload had increased, the taskmasters didn't show any mercy. They didn't show any kindness. They didn't show any compassion. They said, I don't care anything about the fact that it's taking you much longer. I want these bricks done. And the officers of the children of Israel realized they were in evil case, meaning things weren't going to get better. Everything they did under the time of the bondage in Egypt, it was with rigor. Their lives were made bitter by the cruel bondage. Okay? These are our great ancestors in the land of captivity, even as we're in this captivity here in America. Our ancestors, when they came over here off of the slave ship, the cargo slave ships, we were forced to work in the fields, doing the very same thing our great ancestors did in the land of Egypt. They took the mortar and the brick. I'm sorry, let me go back and see how. Let me see exactly what it was. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and brick and in all manner of service in the field. In the field. Our people were cursed in the field then and cursed in the field when we got here to America. Okay? Where does this talk about the slime? Let's see. I think it's the same chapter. Chapter 5, verse 5. And Pharaoh said, Behold, the people of the land now are many, and ye make them rest from their burden. And Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, Ye shall no more give the people straw to make brick, for heretofore let them go and gather straw for themselves. And the tale of the bricks which they did make heretofore ye shall lay upon them. Ye shall not diminish aught thereof, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Okay? So they had the straw, okay, along with, I believe it's slime or something like that, mud or whatever, to make the brick. Okay? But the workload was increased, but the raw materials needed, the straw to make the brick, was decreased. And he still wanted the same production level. Okay? The same thing. Okay? Make me think about, what's the movie? 12 Years a Slave. When the young lady was out there, the slave, and she was picking this cotton. You know, whoever was the low man would get beat. Okay? And she would produce a whole lot of cotton for master, but she would still end up getting beat. You know, it's the same type of thing. Let's see. From there, we're going to move on to the next chapter, Exodus chapter 6, verses 5, 6, and 9. And I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians keep in bondage. And I have remembered my covenant. Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm and with great judgments. Okay? So Pharaoh set up a wicked plan to get our great ancestors to fall into slavery. Okay? In chapter 5, we're seeing what things that the taskmasters were doing and afflicting upon our great ancestors, okay, and making their lives bitter with cruel bondage. and all the work that they were having to do. Not just before, but when Moses and Aaron came to them, and he first asked Pharaoh and said, yo, let the children of God go so that we may sacrifice. He said, oh, no, I'm not doing that. You know, matter of fact, I'm going to make your workload even greater. Since you got time to go and sacrifice, then you should have enough time to make this extra brick. Okay? But now you see it in chapter 6, the Most High is revealing himself to Moses. Okay? And saying that, look, I'm prepared to deliver my people. It's time to set them free. Okay? Verse 9, and Moses spake so unto the children of Israel, but they hearkened not unto Moses for anguish of spirit and for cruel bondage. Okay, so remember the topic is captivity is turning our people's mind into mush. So our people were dealing with hard bondage and cruelty by the hand of Pharaoh and his minions, the taskmasters. Their lives were embittered with cruel bondage, with rigor every single day. The word of deliverance, the word of salvation had come by the prophet Moses, and he was declaring these things unto his brethren, the children of Israel, in the land of Egypt. When he declared these words, verse 9 again, and Moses spake so unto the children of Israel, but they hearkened not unto Moses for anguish of spirit and for cruel bondage. So when Moses was coming to the people saying, look, the Most High prepared to save us. He's going to deliver us out of the land of Egypt. The people didn't want to hear what Moses had to say. They didn't believe him because of cruel bondage. Like, look, bro, I'm not trying to hear that. Well, didn't some dude come last week talking about we was going to be saved out of slavery? Remember last year, old boy came talking about he was going to be saved out of slavery? Nothing changed. Nothing happened. So because the cruel bondage was being afflicted on them so hard, it was, it was unbelievable to think that deliverance was going to come, but the Most High was going to bring about deliverance. Okay. Let's see here. Let's go to chapter 19 of the book of Exodus. Chapter 19, verses 10 through 12. And Yahweh said unto Moses, go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and be ready against the third day. For the third day Yahweh will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. 12. And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, take heed to yourselves that ye go not up unto the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever toucheth the mount shall be surely put to death. Okay, so this was the commandment of the Most High when he was prepared to show his glory, manifest his glory before the children of Israel. So he wanted them to sanctify themselves and get ready on the third day. He was going to appear to them, okay, on the mountain with his great power. Okay, let's see. We're going to go to the book of Numbers now. Chapter 14, verses 2 through 4. Book of Numbers, chapter 14, verses 2 through 4. Okay. Okay, so you see that the children of Israel were afflicted in Egypt, right? Moses came and declared the word. They didn't want to hear it. The Most High fulfilled his word and delivered all the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt with great plagues and terrible wonders upon the land of Egypt, and afflicted them. Repaid the land of Egypt for the evils they inflicted on his people. Led them out of the land of bondage, out of the house of bondage, into the wilderness. The Most High said to Moses, look, get the people prepared. I'm going to show myself to them. I'm going to magnify my glory in their presence, in their sight. Okay. So now the children of Israel had this great cloud of witness, so to speak. They were able to behold the glory of the Most High God. He delivered them out of the house of bondage. He performed miracles, brought manna from heaven, quail. Okay. Scripture says that their clothes and their feet did not wear. The Most High did perform wonderful miracles for the children of Israel. But now we're going to get to this point here. Numbers chapter 14, verses 2 through 4. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt? Or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath Yahweh brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, let us make a captain and let us return into Egypt. So after all that the Most High had done, showed his might, his power, so like his majesty, our great ancestors, the rebellious ones, felt as though for whatever reason, that the Most High couldn't be trusted. That the very man that the Most High used to wrought those miracles in the land of Egypt, that he was now not fit to lead them into the promised land. That this somehow was a pipe dream. The Most High had been faithful up until this point. There was no reason for them to walk in doubt and walk in disbelief. But they did nevertheless. And they blasphemed and they spoke wickedly of the promise that the Most High had in reserve for his people. Furthermore, they gloated, or they rather magnified the land of Egypt, and they so much so that they wanted to get together and go back into Egypt, go back into the house of bondage, go back into captivity. Okay? So the topic being captivity is turning our people's minds into mush. That's what Egypt did to our rebellious ancestors, and for many of our rebellious people today, that's what America is doing. We've been here so long, we've been afflicted so long, we can't even hear the word of truth that brings deliverance and salvation. We don't want to hear it. Okay? And when the Most High brings us to a place to where we might receive the word, we want to go back into the world. We want to go back into Egypt. We want to cleave to those things which will bring no satisfaction. Okay? Let's go to chapter 16 of the book of Numbers, verses 12 through 14. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, which said, we will not come up. Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of a land that floweth with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness, except thou make thyself altogether a prince over us? 14. Moreover, thou hast not brought us into a land that floweth with milk and honey, or given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Wilt thou put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. So again, you're seeing rebellion amongst the people. Okay, what does it say here? Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of a land that floweth with milk and honey? So these rebellious men were equating the house of bondage, Egypt, to a land flowing with milk and honey. They had not quite entered into the land of Canaan, the promised land, the one that the Most High called the land flowing with milk and honey. They didn't enter that yet, but because of their rebellion and because they had to wander in the wilderness to be proved by the Most High, a test that they were failing miserably, they felt this is a pipe dream. It's not going to come to pass. All of what Moses has said, all that this God has said, it ain't going to come to pass. We're not coming up. We don't believe you, Moses. Captivity had turned their minds into mush. That the miracles of God was not proof enough. The faithfulness of the Most High was not proof enough. They still longed and yearned and lusted after Egypt, a land by their own admission they believed to be a land flowing with milk and honey. You brought us out of a beautiful land to come into the wilderness? Think about that. Because that's something that always gets me. Because, you know, if you watch the Ten Commandments movie or Prince of Egypt or anything like that, you know, you see the depiction of the, you know, children of Israel, you know, these white Jews, whatever. But, you know, the children of Israel coming out of Egypt and being very, you know, glad and all of that, and, you know, being relieved to be freed and delivered from the hard bondage, which I'm sure our ancestors and, you know, in all actuality, you know, was grateful for. But for them to want to long to go back into Egypt, that lets us know that Egypt wasn't all bad. There were many elements to Egypt that were enjoyable, okay, that were enticing. There were some luxuries. Although our lives were made bitter by cruel bondage and hard rigor, there were still some luxuries that our people enjoyed in the land of Egypt that you probably couldn't experience anywhere else in the ancient world. Salakia. It's the very same thing we experience here in America. America, the daughter of Babylon, is the great world power. Okay? All the other nations of the earth want to be like America, want to be like the harlot. Okay? If it comes down to anything, you know, political or social or cultural influence, it comes from the West, from America. And the children of Israel are mostly planted here in America, this captivity. And many of us, although the beginning of our history in this land started with hard bondage, being cursed in the field, even as our great ancestors were cursed in the field of Egypt, over time, through the deceitfulness of the teachings of you know, social equality and, you know, integration and all these different things, abolishing the Jim Crow laws and abolishing segregation and all these different things, you know, it's caused our people to believe that, you know, this land is our land as well, that we're equal citizens. Although the evidence of that is to the contrary. This captivity is turning our minds into mush. The promises in his word, which direct us to a hope that is greater than that which is here in America. There's no hope for us here. We know there's no hope. But many of us are filled with such lust that we want to be here. We don't want to leave. We don't want to leave. We want to stay right here in Babylon. We want to stay right here in America and accept her customs and her ways. Reading the other day out of Maccabees, where it says that our people clave to the customs, the heathenistic ways of the Grecians, and they loved it best of all. The high fashions and all that stuff. It's the same stuff that happened in Egypt, the same stuff that's going on today. Our men, our women are enamored with the ways of America and are ingrained in it and enjoy it. Have taken on her customs, the whore that is, the harlot, have taken on her custom, taken on her ways, taken on her identity, and have assimilated to the way of the heathen. We don't want no deliverance. We don't want to be set free. We don't want to go back to Israel. We want to stay right here in hell, in captivity, in bondage. Okay? I'm going to read 13 and 14 one more time. Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of a land that floweth with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, except thou make thyself altogether a prince over us? So they're saying, look, you took us up out of that glorious land, that wonderful metropolis, Egypt, to bring us out here just so you can reign over us and rule over us, so you can bully us. This is the ignorance of our forefathers. 14. Moreover, thou hast not brought us into a land that floweth with milk and honey, or given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Wilt thou put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. Meaning, You lied to us, Moses. You said you're going to do this, this, and this. None of this has happened. You're going to pluck our eyes out, meaning to say, what? Cause us not to see the reality of what's going on. You promised this, and none of it has happened. I'm looking around. I don't see this glorious land flowing milk. Where is it at? We were in one, Moses. You're a liar, Moses. These are the words that the wicked men are saying. We're not coming up. We don't believe you. We don't feel like following you anymore. We sick of this, Moses. Got us out here in the wilderness. All this dust and, humidity and all this other stuff, man, having to deal with. We don't believe you, Moses. You a liar. Let's see. First Maccabees, chapter 1. First Maccabees chapter 2, verses 15, 18 through 20, 43 and 44. The last one, and we'll finish up. First Maccabees chapter 2. Verses 15, 18 through 20, 43 through 44. So 15. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city of Modin to make them sacrifice. Verse 18. Now therefore, come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. So these were the words that the officers of the king had given unto Mattathias and his brethren, saying, look, everybody, has turned from their tradition, have turned from their ways, and have kept the religion of the king. Do the same thing and you'll get a reward. We'll give you a paycheck. We'll give you a stipend. We'll give you some food. We'll give you some food stamp, whatever. Whatever you need, we got you. You just got to not stop keeping these commandments and do what the king is asking you to do. Verse 19. Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. Okay? So Mattathias wasn't having it. Like, I don't care if everybody on the planet follow after the king. I'm not doing it. I'm keeping the ways of my forefathers. Okay? But you see how these officers said, look, there's the men of Judah and that remain in Jerusalem. They already have done it. They have already decided to forsake the covenant and keep the king's commandments. Captivity is turning our people's mind into mush. They don't know what's going on. They're being afflicted so bad, they just, okay, we'll just do it. It's fine. And then when you try to teach them the right way, they're simple. They don't get it. Because their mind has been contaminated and tainted with profanity. They don't know what righteousness is. Okay? Verse 43 and 44. Also all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them and were a stay unto them. So all of our people who fled from the persecution of the world power, of their oppressors, ended up in time joining the ways of their oppressor, just to be safe. 44. So they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger, and wicked men in their wrath, but the rest fled to the heathen for succor or aid. Okay? So some fought against it and rebelled against, what the king wanted, and others said, look, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll give up the ways of our forefathers. We'll give up the righteous law to do what you want because, I need some food. I need to pay my bills. Okay? So you see, even with our ancestors, when we came out of Egypt and into the wilderness, the Most High showed all these wonderful miracles. And they still didn't believe. It wasn't that they didn't believe just Moses. They didn't believe the Most High God. And our people here during the time of the Grecian Empire showed lack of faith. If the Most High furnished a table in the wilderness for our great ancestors, why couldn't they believe that he could do it for them too? They don't have to go to the heathen and adopt their customs in order to find aid and be preserved. The Most High can preserve his people. The Most High shall preserve his people. And even for us now, as we are moving even more and more into Jacob's trouble in the last day, the Most High will preserve us if we keep his commandments. We don't have to receive the vaccine or, mark of the beast or whatever form it may take. We don't have to receive any of these things. We don't have to denounce our God and keep the ways of the heathen in order to be taken care of. If we be faithful and do his will, he shall keep us. But if not, this captivity will turn our people's mind into mush. Shalom.